All right, today we're going to answer the big question, which is where is the cue ball going to go after hitting my object ball using all types of spin? So not only are we going to cover all of the different types of spin, top right, right, bottom, etc., but we're also going to do it in slow speed, medium speed, and fast speed. And stick around for the second half of this video where we're going to go over the difference between inside spin versus outside spin and how using top spin, center ball, stun, and bottom spin affects the tangent line. And one last thing, don't forget to save this video to your Billiards playlist so you could watch it again later and share it with your teammates. All right, so as promised, let's go over where the cue ball is going to go using all different spins. All right, so first we're going to use top spin, or what we call noon, as if we were looking at the face of a clock. And these are going to be all with a nice slow speed, about 35% power. And that's what top spin looks like off the rail. Now here comes top right, or 130. We're going to get a much more dramatic spin off that bottom short rail. Now next we have 3 o'clock, and we're going to see a dramatic spin off that bottom rail as it angles back towards the middle of the table. This one's going to be 430, bottom right, also taking a nice spin off of the rail at slow speed. And also I want you to notice how that bottom spin slows the cue ball down, holding its position. Now 6 o'clock, or bottom spin, really slows the cue ball down and it comes out straight off of that bottom rail, holding position. Now 730 is also a bottom spin, but it's a bottom outside spin. So we're going to see the cue ball take a spin towards me and still holding position. So now we have 9 o'clock, but we don't have any bottom spin. So the cue ball is going to take a slight turn towards me, but back towards the middle of the table. See how much faster 9 o'clock is than 730? Now high right, or 1030, has a little bit more power to it, but it's still outside spin, so it grabs that rail and slows down. So now we're going to increase from about 35% power to about 50% power and see how that changes the cue ball's trajectory. So again, we're going to start with top spin, or noon, and we're going to watch this cue ball hit the object ball and then bounce off that bottom rail and moving forward still to the left rail. And now we're going to be adding inside spin, high right, 130, and we see the ball spin dramatically off that bottom rail, bringing the cue ball all the way back to the top right corner. Now you're going to notice as we move on to 3 o'clock, or right spin, we get that same dramatic spin off of the bottom rail, and it brings the cue ball all the way up table again towards that right pocket. Now with bottom right, or 430, we're going to notice the same type of spin that we had in the last 2 shots, but because it's bottom spin, it's going to slow the cue ball down so it doesn't go all the way up towards that top right pocket. Now going back to straight bottom 6 o'clock, this is the maximum slowdown shot. So we're going to see the cue ball bounce off that bottom rail and come back straight, holding position. Now let's do an overlay of 130 at soft speed and medium speed, and you can see how similar the paths are, but where the cue ball ends up is different. Now, when we compare top right and bottom right at the same speed, we see that the cue ball's path is almost identical, but where the cue ball ends up is slightly different. All right, let's get back to bottom left, 730, and see how the spin brings the ball back towards me and landing right on the spot. Now, when we move to left spin, or 9 o'clock, we don't have any of that bottom spin. So the cue ball grabs that rail with reverse spin and comes back up the table. And last but not least, top left, 1030, we're going to see that cue ball grab the rail again and take a nice little spin before it converts to a natural roll and heads up table. Let's watch it again in slow motion. We see the cue ball take that little J-shaped spin, and that's because the cue ball is still spinning forward after it hits the object ball and the rail. But once it loses that forward spin, it just becomes a natural roll and heads straight in its natural trajectory. All right, so now that we've done soft and medium speed, let's bump it up to high speed, about 70% power, and see exactly where each spin goes. All right, first up is going to be top spin, and we see how the ball continued to carry forward, touching the left rail, and then moving up table. Top right takes an almost identical path to noon because of all the forward momentum, but we get more movement because of running English. Right spin takes a dramatic spin off of the bottom rail and widens the angle, which makes it turn off of the left rail and then scratch in the top right pocket.
Oh no.
Bottom right slows the cue ball down into the bottom rail, where the spin takes off of the left rail and widens the direction so it touches the top rail almost center. Bottom English is going to slow the cue ball down again after contact with the object ball. And then that backward spin is going to make the cue ball come off the rail, not straight, but back towards me a little bit before eventually converting to a natural roll. Bottom left spin is also going to slow the cue ball down after contact, hitting that bottom rail and then spinning left back towards me and then off the right rail towards the middle of the table. Now, left spin, unlike bottom left, has a little bit more power, so it's going to slam into that bottom rail with spin and then take a nice left turn back towards me and then go further up the table. Now check out top right. Because it's moving with forward spin and right, you see how it curves there? Let's check that one out again. Now I went ahead and slowed this replay down. We're going to have two types of spin, top and right. So the top spin is going to keep the ball moving forward towards that left rail, so you're going to see it curve before being converted into a natural roll, angle in, angle out. Now let's watch it one more time. The forward spin is only right after contact and hitting the rail, then it becomes a natural roll with a more predictive angle in, angle out. So when we're using any type of spin below center, whether that be bottom right or bottom left, the cue ball will lose speed on the way to the object ball because it's spinning backwards. And then also too, potentially after it touches the rail. Now I want to talk about bottom spin and how it slows the ball down. This is especially true for this outside English shot because the cue ball is going to reverse spin when it hits the rail. This is sometimes called a hold shot or a kill shot because the speed gets killed and you can more easily hold your position because of that slower speed. Now, when we look at the table from a top view, left spin looks like the ball is spinning clockwise, which is the opposite direction of the cue ball's momentum. So let's take a moment to read the diagram here. It says English spinning against the cue ball direction equals slower speed off the rail. Think of it as a backwards rail spin from a top view. And we're going to watch it one more time and we're going to see how that outside spin pumps the brakes right there because the reverse spin kills the speed and holds the position. But when we increase to a medium speed, we see that the cue ball grabs off that bottom rail and comes back towards me. And at 70% speed, we really see the cue ball grab off that bottom rail and almost touching my hand. Now this is going to be very similar if we're also doing top left spin, because we're still using left spin. Even though we're putting top on it, it's going to grind against the rail. So this is sometimes called reverse or hold spin or hold English, because with this spin, we can hold the ball in a particular area because we're slowing the ball down with reverse spin instead of using running spin where the ball will go running off at a higher speed. Now let's take it back to the video and see if the cue ball does follow that yellow line. Now this is technically top left spin, but it's slow speed. So the top spin wears off almost immediately and converts to a natural roll. Now remember when I shot it at higher speed and we saw the cue ball take that little J curve off that bottom rail before converting to a natural roll? That's because the cue ball is still spinning forward after it makes contact and then turns into a natural roll. Now, when we look at running spin, specifically bottom right, the right spin is moving in the direction of the cue ball's natural travel. So when that cue ball hits the 4 ball in this diagram, it's going to bump into that left rail with counterclockwise spin, which is going to propel the cue ball almost like a spinning tire hitting the road. So let's go ahead and watch bottom right spin and watch it take that right spin, your left, into the left rail. And if we change our spin to top right, the ball will still be spinning to the right. So it'll take a wide right-hand turn off of that left short rail, creating more speed. That is running English off the rail. Let's go ahead and watch top right spin. And because it's spinning right and going to the right, the cue ball is going to turn like a wheel off that bottom rail and then go over to that left rail. And one more time before we do the overlay of top right and bottom right together, you can see that it takes that dramatic turn off of that bottom rail. And now here's both together, top right and bottom right. Very, very similar paths. The slower moving ball is bottom right spin. The easiest way I like to think about left and right spin is left and right spin are for the rails. Top and bottom spin are for the playing surface. And that's because top spin and center ball make the tangent line of the cue ball come out in a peace sign, whereas stun or bottom English makes it come out in the shape of an L. So let's take a look at the tangent line using top spin, center ball, stun, and different speeds of bottom spin. All right, first we're going to start off with top spin at about 35% power. So from the previous diagram, we know that the cue ball is going to strike our object ball and exit in a direction of a peace sign. Now we're going to bump up the speed to about 70%, as we see in the power meter in the top left-hand corner. But with more power, we're going to get a little bit of a side step to the right of the object ball, but it's still going to come back and forth in generally a straight direction. Now we're going to move on to center ball, and I want to show you that at slow speeds, there's really no difference between center and top spin. You see how it's that middle diamond there? Now let's look at top spin and center ball laid one over top of the other, and we can see that the tangent line is almost identical at slow speeds. Now for me personally, this was something that I often confused while I was learning the physics of the tangent line. The peace sign indicates where the cue ball is going to go for both top spin and for center ball. Now, the most important part to remember is to keep one finger over the shooting line. And in this diagram, your index finger tells you where the cue ball goes.
By the way, if you're learning something, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel.
Now we're going to increase the speed again to about 70%, and we'll see the direction change of the tangent line and where it goes. Look at the diamonds on the left rail. So it went in between the diamonds that time. Now, an interesting observation here, even though we're using stun, we're hitting it too slow for it to exit at an L angle. So you see how it hit that middle diamond there? It was very similar to top and center because the natural roll took over. Now we're increasing the speed to about 50%. Watch where the cue ball goes. It went to that third diamond and spun off the rail. Now, when we increase the speed to 70%, we're going to get more of that L-shaped action and almost scratch in the side pocket. And that's because stun with more power has backspin after collision. Now we're moving on to bottom English, but slower speed. Because we're putting more bottom spin at slow speed, it acts like a stun shot, almost scratching again in the side pocket. So let's watch the two together. Let's watch stun at 70% and bottom English at 30% and see that they're almost identical in their tangent lines.
So this is a very important fact that you need to remember. You can either use less spin with more power or more spin with less power. They both equal the same result.
Now let's pick up the pace with 50% power, bottom English, and see how the cue ball almost scratches in the top left-hand corner. But when we increase the speed to 70%, we're going to see a lot of that backwards action bring the cue ball almost straight up to the top rail. Let's watch it again in slow motion. Let's watch how that backward spin halts the forward motion and converts it to a natural roll all the way up to the top rail. Now what's happening here is the cue ball spinning backwards, gripping the table, and then once the spinning stops, it starts to naturally roll. You see the dots on the ball? Now there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's misusing the stun shot at slow speeds. Sometimes we think that just because we're aiming below center, that the cue ball is going to stop when we have a straight in shot like this. But as we're going to see in this slow motion replay here, the cue ball starts spinning backwards, watch the dots in the ball, and then it starts rolling forward. That's because the cue ball wasn't still sliding backwards when it contacted the object ball. And then so it starts to roll forward instead of stopping. But this is a great tool to remember if we need to get position for our next ball, but we want to hold our position without going too far. But if we increase the speed to 50%, watch how the cue ball now stops dead in its track. Now we'll watch it again in slow motion, and we can see the red dots on the ball, how they spin backwards all the way to the red 3 ball. And it transfers the power to the 3 ball, stopping the cue ball dead in its place, which would be a great setup shot if the 8 ball was over here instead. And lastly, when we increase the speed to 70%, that stun shot now becomes a draw shot. Same aim on the cue ball, but with more power. And we'll watch that one more time in slow motion. And you'll see how the cue ball is still spinning backwards after contact, which is what makes it a classic draw shot.
So, what'd you think of today's video? Did you learn something new? And for all you pool players out there that play in a league, drop your APA skill level or your Fargo rating in the comments down below, and tell everyone what skill level that you'd like to be just 1 year from now. And if you like my teaching style, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to give this video a like and a share so that other pool players out there just like you can find this content to step up their game. Now don't forget to check my channel's playlist for more videos in this series where I'm going to do different shot layouts to help you unravel the mystery of where the cue ball goes next so that you can get in better position. Alright, that's all for now, and I'll see you in the next video.
Click here if you want to watch another one of my videos.